I was 14 years old. It was an average night, around 9 p.m. My little cousin and I were at his house. I was babysitting for the night while my mom and aunt were shopping, and my dad and uncle were at the movie theater. We were sitting there watching TV when I started feeling really strange. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I kept watching TV with my cousin, but the feeling wouldn't go away. I got up and walked to the back door to lock it. As I came back through the kitchen, I saw what was causing my weird feeling. In the window, there was a very decrepit and homeless-looking man, staring into the window, looking at my cousin. My protective instincts kicked in. I pretended like I didn't see the guy and told my little cousin that we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon and they wouldn't want him staying up late. I went upstairs and put him to bed, knowing full well that there was a man outside who wanted in. At the time, I was about 125 pounds and 5 feet 8 inches tall, and I played football for my school. I was pretty strong for my age. I went downstairs and straight into the kitchen, grabbing one of those meat tenderizing hammers. I turned back to the window where I had seen him before, but he was gone. I ran back to the front door and checked that it was locked. Both the deadbolt and the knob were secure. I ran back upstairs with my meat tenderizer and went into my cousin's room, sitting down in front of the door. He asked me what I was doing, and I said he didn't need to worry about it and that he should keep his head low. I called the cops and then my dad and uncle. The cops said they would take half an hour, and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I heard a window shatter and the sound of heavy boots walking around on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers, and keep silent. I could hear the guy walking around downstairs. It was horrifying. I gripped that meat tenderizer and waited. About 5 minutes passed, and then I heard the boots walking up the stairs. At this point, I was having a freaking heart attack. My cousin's door was no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I heard him opening the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. He walked back downstairs, and I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later, the police showed up and burst into the house. It turned out the guy was loose from a mental hospital 1 province away. After the police apprehended the man, I felt a sense of relief, but the fear lingered for a long time. The officers explained that the man, whose name was Henry, had escaped from a psychiatric hospital a few days earlier. He was known for his aggression and unpredictable behavior. The police praised me for my bravery and quick thinking, but I still felt uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my cousin's room until our parents returned. My mom hugged me and said I did a great job, and my dad patted me on the back, saying he was proud of me. But I knew that this incident would stay with me forever. The next day, I went to school, but I couldn't focus on my classes. All I could think about was that man and what could have happened if I hadn't noticed him in time. My friends noticed I was acting strangely, and I told them the whole story. They were shocked and also praised me for my bravery. A few weeks passed, and I began to notice that something was off. I became more vigilant and suspicious. Every time I was alone, I felt like someone was watching me. I started checking the windows and doors multiple times a night, and it became a habit. One night, while I was babysitting my cousin again, I heard strange noises outside. I went to the window and saw a shadow darting behind the trees. My heart started racing again. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. He said he was on his way and told me not to go outside. I sat in front of my cousin's door, just like before, and waited. About 20 minutes passed, and I heard a car pull up to the house. It was my dad. He came inside and hugged me. We checked the entire house together and made sure everything was okay. My dad said it might have been an animal or just the wind, but I knew it wasn't. The next day, I decided to talk to the school psychologist. She listened to me and said it was normal to feel fear after such an incident, but it was important not to let it control my life. She gave me some tips on how to deal with anxiety, and I started following them. A few months passed, and I gradually began to feel better. I no longer checked the windows and doors every night and wasn't afraid to be alone. But I knew that this incident had changed me forever. I became more attentive and cautious, and it helped me in the future. Years later, I became a police officer. I realized that I wanted to protect people and help them feel safe. I often thought back to that night and understood that it was then that I realized how important it is to be vigilant and prepared for any eventuality. One day, while I was already working in the police force, I received a call from my supervisor. He told me that Henry, the same man who had terrified me as a child, had escaped from the hospital again. I felt a surge of fear, but this time, I was ready. I knew I had to protect people from him. We began the search and soon found Henry. He was in the same neighborhood where my cousin lived. I approached him and saw that he looked even more haggard and dangerous than before. I arrested him and took him to the station. After this incident, I realized that fear isn't always a bad thing. It can make us stronger and help us protect those we care about. I continued to work in the police force, helping people and knowing that every time I saved someone, I made the world a little safer. The story that began that night when I was 14 years old became an important part of my life. It taught me to be strong, brave, and always ready for any challenge. And I knew that, despite all the difficulties, I would always protect those who needed help. I always thought that living in the wilderness had its advantages. The quiet, the peace, the opportunity to enjoy nature. But that night, everything changed. I was a sophomore in high school and often babysat my younger siblings when my parents went out. Our house stood alone at the end of a road that turned into a cul-de-sac. At night, no one ever came up to our road, except for our parents returning home. That evening, it all started with the dogs barking. Our dogs often barked at cows, coyotes, or other night creatures, so at first, I didn't think much of it. But when I saw headlights coming up the road, my heart began to race. This wasn't my parents' car. It looked different. The unfamiliar car pulled up to our house and stopped in the driveway. The headlights shone directly at the house, and I felt a chill of fear. After a few minutes, the car drove away, but 10 minutes later, it returned. This time, it pulled right into the yard and stopped. I realized I needed to act. I told my brother and sister to hide in the closet in my parents' bedroom. I grabbed my dad's shotgun, checked it, and took a few shells. The shotgun was heavy, but I remembered everything my dad had taught me: how to check the gun, how to hold it, how to aim. I didn't load the shotgun but kept the shells in my pocket just in case. Stepping out onto the porch, I saw our dog, a large German Shepherd, barking and growling at the car. The headlights were shining right at me, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. I called the dog, and he came to my side. At that moment, I cocked the gun and aimed it at the car. Whoever was inside got the message and sped off. I stood on the porch, shaking with fear and adrenaline. Going back inside, I propped the shotgun by the door and told my brother and sister that everything was clear. But inside, I was terrified. I started crying, realizing what had just happened. The next day, I told my parents about the incident. They were shocked but praised me for my bravery and ability to act in an emergency. My dad reminded me how important it was to know how to defend myself and my family. My mom was scared but proud of how I handled the situation. A few days later, my mom told a friend who lived nearby about what had happened. That's when we found out that several strange and frightening events had occurred in our area that year. 2 people had been stabbed in their home, just 2 miles down the road. They were sleeping when someone broke in and attacked them. Both survived but were badly shaken. Additionally, a house 10 miles away had been robbed. The owners weren't home, but the thieves took many valuable items. These incidents happened months apart, and no one had connected them until my mom shared our story. My parents decided to beef up our security. Dad installed surveillance cameras around the house, and Mom bought additional locks for the doors and windows. We also started checking more frequently to ensure all doors and windows were locked at night. The police began an investigation, and it wasn't long before they discovered that the red Toyota Tacoma I had seen that night had been spotted near the other crime scenes. They never found the owner of the truck, but the police believed it could be someone from a neighboring town who knew our area and its vulnerabilities. My siblings and I became more cautious. I taught them how to act in case of danger, and we often practiced shooting with a shotgun. My dad said it was important not just for defense but also for confidence. A few months later, a new family moved into our area. They bought the house that had been robbed and started fixing it up. We met them and found them to be very nice people. They had a son my age, and we quickly became friends. One evening, as we sat around a campfire in the backyard, the new neighbor, Jake, told me that his family had moved here to escape something. He didn't go into details, but I sensed they had their secrets. Over time, I noticed that Jake often disappeared for a few days. He said he was visiting relatives, but I felt there was more to the story. One day, I decided to follow him and found out he was meeting someone in the woods near our house. I hid and watched them. Jake was meeting with a man I had never seen before. They were talking about something important, and I realized it was related to whatever they were running from. The next day, I decided to tell Jake what I had seen. He was surprised but confessed that his family was hiding from a criminal organization that had been pursuing them in another city. They had moved here to start a new life but were afraid they would be found. I promised Jake that I would help him and his family. We decided we needed to be vigilant and ready for any danger. I told my parents about the situation, and they agreed to help. One night, as everyone was sleeping, I heard a noise outside the window. I got up and saw a car pulling up to Jake's house. It was the same red Toyota Tacoma. I realized these were the people Jake's family was hiding from. I quickly woke my parents and told them what was happening. We grabbed our shotguns and went outside. Jake and his family also came out, ready to defend themselves. We surrounded the car, and I saw two men inside. The men got out of the car, and a standoff ensued. They were armed, but we were ready. My dad and Jake kept them at gunpoint, while my mom and I watched the surroundings to make sure no one snuck up from behind. After a tense confrontation, the men surrendered. We called the police, and they were arrested. It turned out they were members of the same criminal organization Jake's family was hiding from. After the arrest of the criminals, life in our area became more peaceful. Jake, his family, and ours grew even closer, and our families often spent time together. We knew we could always count on each other. Years passed, and I graduated from high school. I went to college and moved to the city, but I always returned home for the holidays. The house in the wilderness became a place where I felt safe and where there were always people who loved me. Lying on the couch at about 1 a.m. with my girlfriend, we were watching The Village. For those who haven't seen it, it's a mildly scary movie. We had just gotten past a jump scare scene when I saw in my peripheral vision a flashlight outside turn on, then immediately off, followed by the sound of our back door shutting. I looked at my girlfriend, and she nodded to say she heard it too. Okay, time to soil my pants. I got up slowly, sneaked to the doorway, and poked my head into the kitchen, where our back door was. The only light in the kitchen was from the TV in the lounge, so I couldn't really see anything. I hunched down and creep into the kitchen, around the fridge to the left, and immediately stop, frozen. All I could see was the silhouette of a tall, thin human figure with its back towards me, facing the corner behind the dining table. It was totally still, not making a sound. What the hell was I supposed to do? I reckon I was frozen there for a whole minute, just staring at the figure. Eventually, I looked back at the doorway to the lounge to see if my girlfriend had come into the kitchen, but she must have stayed on the couch. When I turned back to the figure, it was still there, but it had turned around and was facing me now. I could see the silhouette and two dim, unblinking eyes. I screamed and ran into the lounge room, grabbed my girlfriend by the arm, and pulled her into my bedroom. I've never moved so quickly in my life. We locked the door and jumped behind the bed. I was hyperventilating while my girlfriend was loudly asking me what the hell was going on. I kept telling her to shh, and finally, she did. We just sat there listening for any sounds of movement for maybe 10 minutes. I pulled out my cell and called 911 once I'd calmed down, saying that we had a break-in and I wasn't sure if he was armed. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on our front door, which was luckily across the corridor from my bedroom door, so I quickly dashed out of my bedroom and out the front door hand in hand with my girlfriend. And there was nobody outside. We looked around a bit and called out, expecting the cops to come around the corner or something, but there was just nothing. I lost my nerve, ran back inside, and into my bedroom again. An hour later, the cops showed up and shouted out to us from the front door since we weren't opening it. They searched our house and found nothing. To this day, I have no idea what the heck happened that night. Several days passed, but I couldn't forget that terrifying evening. My girlfriend and I tried to act normal, but the tension was palpable. We both knew something was off, but we couldn't figure out what. I decided I needed to get to the bottom of this and started looking for answers. First, I decided to talk to the neighbors. Maybe someone saw something suspicious that night. I went around to all the houses in our neighborhood, but no one saw or heard anything. This only heightened my anxiety. How could that be possible? Someone must have noticed something. I turned to the internet. Maybe someone had experienced something similar and shared their stories. I found several forums where people discussed paranormal events and left my story there. Responses started coming in almost immediately. Some people wrote that it might have been a ghost or a demon, others advised consulting psychics or priests. But none of the answers gave me any clarity. One evening, as I sat at my computer browsing another forum, I stumbled upon an old thread titled "Mysterious Figures at Night." People shared stories about seeing strange silhouettes in their homes at night. Many of these stories were similar to mine. I started reading the comments and found one that caught my attention. A user named Shadow Hunter wrote that he had encountered a similar phenomenon a few years ago. He described seeing a tall, thin figure in his home one night. It stood still and stared at him. He too was scared and called the police, but they found nothing. However, a few days later, he found a strange item in his house, a small amulet shaped like an eye. He wrote that after finding the amulet, the figure never appeared again. I decided to contact this user and sent him a private message. He replied almost immediately and offered to meet in person to discuss the details. We agreed to meet at a local cafe the next day. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early. I was nervous and didn't know what to expect. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man with a serious expression entered the cafe. He approached me and introduced himself as John, the Shadow Hunter. We sat down, and John began to tell his story. He described seeing the same figure I had seen. He too was scared and called the police, but they found nothing. However, a few days later, he found a strange amulet shaped like an eye in his house. He said that after finding the amulet, the figure never appeared again. John explained that he believed this amulet was some kind of protective talisman. He said he found it in an old house he had bought a few years ago. He suggested I look for something similar in my house, as it might help get rid of the figure. Returning home, I decided to thoroughly search the entire house. I started with the attic, where old items from previous owners were stored. I rummaged through all the boxes and drawers but found nothing. Then I went down to the basement, where more old items were stored. I searched every corner but again found nothing. I was starting to lose hope when I suddenly noticed an old wooden box in the corner of the basement. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, and I decided to open it. Inside, I found several old photographs, letters, and one strange item, a small amulet shaped like an eye. It was exactly as John had described. I took the amulet and went upstairs. I decided to place it on a shelf in the living room where it would be visible. I hoped this would help get rid of the figure. That night, I decided not to go to sleep. I sat in the living room and watched the amulet. The clock ticked, and I grew more nervous. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. I froze, listening. The footsteps grew louder, and I realized someone was coming into the living room. I stood up and held the amulet in my hands. Suddenly, the figure appeared in the doorway. It stood still and stared at me. I raised the amulet and showed it to the figure. For a moment, it seemed to waver, but then it disappeared. I stood there for a few more minutes, listening, but nothing else happened. I placed the amulet back on the shelf and sat down on the couch. I was exhausted but felt relieved. It seemed the amulet had indeed helped. Several weeks passed, and nothing strange happened again. My girlfriend and I gradually began to forget that terrifying evening. We tried to act normal, and the tension slowly dissipated. I decided to thank John for his help and sent him a message. He replied that he was glad the amulet helped and wished us luck. I promised that if I ever encountered something similar again, I would definitely seek his help. My girlfriend and I decided it was time to move to a new house. We didn't want to live in a place where so many strange events had occurred. We found a new house and moved there. Now we hope we will never encounter anything like that again. Several months passed, and we fully settled into our new home. We tried not to remember that terrifying evening and lived a normal life. I found a new job, and my girlfriend took up her hobby of painting. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I suddenly felt like someone was watching us. I looked at my girlfriend, and she felt it too. We both froze, listening. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the kitchen. I stood up and went there, holding the amulet in my hands. In the kitchen, I saw the same figure. It stood still and stared at me. I raised the amulet and showed it to the figure. It wavered and disappeared. I returned to the living room and sat next to my girlfriend. We hugged and realized that everything would be okay now. A lot of time has passed, and we never encountered that figure again. We lived a happy life, and the tension completely disappeared. We understood that sometimes strange and inexplicable things happen in life, but the main thing is not to lose hope and seek answers. I will always be grateful to John for his help and support. Without him, I might never have found the amulet and gotten rid of the figure. Now I know that there is always a way out of any situation if you don't give up and seek answers. My wife and I recently moved out of a home that I can only describe as fucked up. The house caused so much anger and hatred. Whatever entity resides in the home is either menacing or pure evil. Even as soon as my wife moved into the home when she was a child, she told me a story of when her and her little brother were playing one night in his room. They were playing with a leapfrog-type device. She described in detail about how she was showing her brother how to use it and it began to act strange. Strange sounds came out of it. And then a man's voice began screaming from it. She said it was saying something about a list, something about making mistakes. Screaming and cursing until she turned it off. So let's fast forward some. I met my wife a few years ago and needless to say, she got knocked up. Ha. We're a condom kids. Anyway. We decided that since it was the logical thing to do, I would move in with her. Sweet, no problem. At the time I worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This will come up later. After a few weeks of moving in, I noticed something strange about the house. The upstairs where we lived seemed menacing in a way. Like someone was in the other room waiting for you. At first I brushed it off as just being nervous. New house, new life kinda thing. I also thought it was from the pretty much steady insomnia work was causing me. As time went on I began noticing more and more. Whenever the house should have been dead silent, things would happen. Footsteps up and down the hallways, knocks on doors, and sometimes I would swear I heard whispers. Being an avid believer in spirits, I wasn't particularly afraid. Until things started getting dark. One morning as I was lying in bed, watching Netflix and hoping to fall asleep, I heard a rustling from the closet. It was just light enough in the room that you could make everything out. I saw nothing and thought maybe it was just the fan. Something moved out of the corner of my eye and as I looked at the closet, a dark ball moved from the closet to the bedroom door. It was about the size of a softball and moved about as fast as a person could to the door. Later into the week my wife had gotten into the bad habit of sleeping with the closet light on. I blame myself for that one. Should have kept my mouth shut. So we're lying there talking about baby stuff. Women. And I noticed the curtain that covered the closet opening move. My wife was curled into me facing my chest and I was staring at the closet. As I kept watching I saw what I can only describe as a tiny mist-like figure, not like white mist but slightly darker than the rest of the background, move out from the closet. It was maybe 3 feet tall and vanished as quick as it appeared. As soon as I began telling my wife what had happened, she had a sharp pinch on her back. She didn't cry out or scream, she calmly turned around and shouted, "Get the fuck out and leave us the fuck alone." Too bad it didn't work. Now, let's fast forward. You're probably wondering, what else happened? Well, small stuff here and there for a while. Footsteps were regular. And I know some of you are probably saying it's the house settling, jackass. I would agree, but not only did the footsteps stretch out the entire length of the 20-foot hallway, they sometimes were fast. And the knocks on the doors were very rhythmic, you know, like when you knock on a friend's door when they're home or something. So let's get to scary stuff. After this recent Christmas, things began to spark up to a new level. One day I was sitting on my computer and my wife came into the room asking me what I needed from the store. The computer room was directly across from the bathroom, our daughter's door was to the immediate left of that, and the stairs were to the right. I began telling my wife what I wanted when she looked out the door and turned. Well. Ghost white. Her eyes got big and her mouth dropped. She slowly turned toward me. I just saw a man walk into Elena's room. She begins describing what it looked like. It was about 6 feet tall, black and only slightly translucent. While she's describing this, I walk out into the hallway and go into my daughter's room. Have you ever walked into a freezer, like the ones Walmart stocks ice cream in? That immediate chill is what I felt when I walked in there. There was nothing, of course, but as soon as we began walking out, a set of metal bed frames we had laying against the wall, for over a year I might add, slid down and fell to the floor. My wife turned back into the room and told whatever it was to get the fuck out of our home. But it didn't, of course. Come January, things really picked up before we moved out. The power got knocked out during a sudden storm and we were left in the dark for a night. My wife at this point wanted nothing to do with the home at this point and wanted to stay at her dad's. So we began packing her things for the night. I went downstairs and got my daughter loaded up in the car, and as I started walking back and my wife shot out of the door nearly in tears. I asked her what was wrong and she only said simply, "I don't want to talk, close the door, let's go." The upstairs to the home is pitch fucking black even on the brightest day due to the layout. So when the power's off during a overcast, you might as well be underground. My wife was in our room gathering her makeup and things with only a flashlight. As she was loading things into her bag, she heard someone walk from the stairs, down the hallway and right up against her back. She assumed it was me, but when she turned around she saw nothing but black. Not like darkness black. Imagine someone holding a black sheet in front of you. Something like that. Even on our moving out day, things were happening upstairs. It was the worst I've personally ever felt it. Just dread and sorrow. My wife once again had something walk up on her, and heard knocks on the bedroom door while she was packing. We've gone back a few times to get a thing or two since we left in February. Every time it's terrifying walking up the stairs. Chapter 9, The History of the House. To understand the depth of the evil that resided in that house, it's important to delve into its history. The house was built in the early 1900s by a wealthy family who had made their fortune in the textile industry. The family, the Blackwoods, were known for their eccentricities and their penchant for the occult. Rumors abounded that they held seances and practiced dark rituals within the walls of the house. The Blackwoods' reign over the house was short-lived. Within a decade, the family had fallen into disarray. The patriarch, Edgar Blackwood, was found dead in his study, his body contorted in a grotesque manner. The official cause of death was listed as a heart attack, but those who knew the family whispered of darker forces at play. After the Blackwoods, the house passed through several owners, each experiencing their own share of misfortune. The next family to move in was the Johnsons. They were a happy family of 4, but their time in the house was marred by tragedy. The youngest child, a boy named Samuel, fell down the stairs and broke his neck. The family moved out shortly after, unable to bear the weight of their grief. The house then stood empty for several years before being purchased by the Smiths. They were a young couple, eager to start a family. However, their dreams were shattered when the wife, Emily, suffered a miscarriage. The couple left the house soon after, their hearts heavy with sorrow. Fast forward to the present day, and the house has once again found new occupants. A young couple, much like my wife and I, have moved in. They are blissfully unaware of the dark history that permeates the walls of their new home. But it won't be long before they too begin to notice the strange occurrences, the menacing presence that seems to lurk in every corner. The first night in the house was uneventful for the new couple. They unpacked their belongings, exploring the nooks and crannies of their new home. The house was old, but it had a certain charm to it. The creaking floorboards and the drafty windows only added to its character. As they settled into bed that night, they felt a sense of contentment. They had found their dream home, a place where they could build a life together. Little did they know that their dream would soon turn into a nightmare. It didn't take long for the strange occurrences to begin. The couple would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They would dismiss it as the house settling, but the sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate to be anything natural. They would also hear whispers, soft and indistinct, but always there. It was as if the house itself was trying to tell them something, to warn them of the danger that lurked within its walls. One night, as the couple lay in bed, they heard a rustling from the closet. They dismissed it as the wind, but the sound was too persistent, too deliberate. They got out of bed and opened the closet door, but there was nothing there. As they turned to go back to bed, they saw a dark figure standing in the doorway. It was tall and menacing, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The couple froze in terror, unable to move or speak. The figure stood there for a moment, then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The couple decided that they needed to get to the bottom of the strange occurrences. They began to research the history of the house, digging through old records and talking to the previous owners. What they discovered was chilling. They learned about the Blackwoods and their penchant for the occult. They learned about the subsequent owners and the tragedies that had befallen them. They realized that the house was not just a house, but a vessel for dark and malevolent forces. Desperate to rid the house of its evil presence, the couple decided to hold a séance. They gathered a group of friends and sat in a circle in the living room, holding hands and calling out to the spirits that resided within the walls. At first, nothing happened. But then, the room grew cold, and the air was filled with a sense of dread. The couple felt a presence, a dark and menacing force that seemed to be watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. The couple decided that they needed to confront the evil presence head-on. They stood in the hallway, calling out to the spirit, demanding that it leave their home. The air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder, but the couple stood their ground. Suddenly, the dark figure appeared before them, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The couple felt a wave of terror wash over them, but they refused to back down. They stood their ground, demanding that the spirit leave their home. The couple decided that they needed to perform an exorcism. They gathered the necessary supplies and stood in the hallway, reciting the ancient words that were said to banish evil spirits. The air grew colder, and the whispers grew louder, but the couple refused to back down. Suddenly, the dark figure appeared before them, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The couple felt a wave of terror wash over them, but they refused to back down. They stood their ground, reciting the ancient words, demanding that the spirit leave their home. The exorcism seemed to work. The strange occurrences stopped, and the couple felt a sense of relief. They had banished the evil presence from their home, and they could finally live in peace. But they knew that the evil was not truly gone. It was still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to move into the house. They knew that they had to warn others, to share their story and prevent the cycle of tragedy from continuing. The couple decided to share their story with the world. They wrote about their experiences in the house, about the strange occurrences and the menacing presence that had haunted them. They warned others about the dangers of the house, about the dark and malevolent forces that resided within its walls. They hoped that their story would serve as a warning, that it would prevent others from falling victim to the evil that lurked within the house. They knew that they had done their part, that they had shared their story and warned others about the dangers that awaited them. The house still stands, a testament to the dark and malevolent forces that reside within its walls. It is a place of tragedy and sorrow, a place where dreams turn into nightmares. But it is also a place of warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. The couple's story serves as a cautionary tale, a warning to those who would dare to enter the house. It is a reminder that evil is real, that it exists in the world, and that it can strike at any time. The future of the house is uncertain. It may stand empty for years, a testament to the evil that resides within its walls. Or it may find new occupants, unsuspecting victims who will fall prey to the dark and malevolent forces that lurk within its shadows. But one thing is certain, the house will never be truly free of its evil presence. It is a place of darkness and despair, a place where dreams turn into nightmares. And it will always be a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to enter its walls. 2 years ago, my parents bought a house in Vermont and were selling my childhood home to move to said house. I went to college very close by, and my friends wanted to hang out that weekend, so I decided to sleep in my creepily staged house, with a giant for sale sign on the lawn. The parents were in VT, so I was home alone. I'd always been skittish and paranoid, and generally unable to sleep in that house by myself, but being the badass college student that I was, that night I hung out with my friends, got a little drunk, and went home to sink into blissful oblivion. 3 a.m. rolls around, and I am powerfully jolted from deep slumber by my house's alarm system wailing at decibels not suited for human ears. Being 19, female, and highly rapeable, I feel for the first time in my life a terror so pure and overpowering that my entire body starts shaking uncontrollably. I rip off the covers and run to my bedroom door, lock it, run back to my bed and grab my bedside lamp. Here I am, the badass college student finally okay being home alone, crying to myself as I crouch in the corner behind my bed, all while clutching a lamp above my head as I bore holes into the bedroom door with my eyes. 5 minutes pass. 10 minutes pass. 15 minutes pass. I should note at this time that our house was notorious with local police for accidentally setting off our alarm system for one reason or another. I'm trying to listen for any telltale noises in the house of burglars, serial killers, desperate house squatters, or rapists, but the banshee-like alarm system from hell is making it an impossible task. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the alarm system cuts. It stops. Complete silence. I am crapping myself in fear. Is this a good sign or a bad one? Does that mean the police are coming, or did the bad guys figure out how to disable the ear-bleed-inducing screeches? 5 more minutes pass, and I see car headlights on the street outside my bedroom window. I don't know what to make of this. Suddenly, I get mad. Really mad. I have a lamp. Any burglar should be rightfully terrified of me if I go wandering out into the house, especially after that godforsaken alarm. So I take my lamp and creep out into the house. Bedrooms are on the second floor. Through the front windows, I see flashlights bobbing around outside my house in the front lawn. I proceed slowly down the stairs and into the dark front hall, and turn to go into the kitchen. I don't want to turn on any lights and alert people of exactly where I am, so I stay in the dark. I am standing there, lamp raised, fear and anger on my face in my terrifying Hello Kitty short pajamas when suddenly there's a knock on the glass back door directly adjacent to me. I jump, scream, and drop my beloved lamp. I stare in horror at the man on my back porch, who is pointing a flashlight at me and now at himself, and he's a police officer. So I let him and his partner in. They ask me who I am, and I break down into a huge, sobbing mess, letting them know I'm the college student daughter, blah blah blah, please tell me I'm not going to get raped tonight. One of the officers stays with me and comforts me while the other searches the house. No sign of any kind of forced entry, nobody here. Do they want me to stay around outside for a while, just so I feel better? Now I'm feeling pretty stupid. No, officers, no. It's fine. I let them outside, thank them, triple check the locks on every window and door, then go back to my room. Lamp mess be damned. R.I.P. lamp. My dad calls me soon after, freaking out because the alarm company called him about 20 times before he actually woke up. He stays on the phone with me until it starts to get light outside, and then I finally go to sleep. Turns out there was a faulty wire in the alarm setup on my front door. It just randomly decided to fail when I was home alone. Still one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And I really liked that lamp. A few days had passed since that terrifying incident, and I still couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The house I grew up in had always seemed like a safe place to me, but now it had become a source of fear. I decided to spend the weekend at home to try to come to terms with these feelings and perhaps find answers to the questions that haunted me. On Saturday morning, I woke up early and decided to explore the house. I started with the attic, where old items that we didn't take with us to Vermont were stored. The attic had always been a place of mystery and intrigue for me. As a child, I often played there, imagining myself as an explorer of ancient ruins. Climbing the creaky stairs, I turned on the light and looked around. Dusty boxes, old furniture, toys, everything reminded me of my childhood. I began to sift through the items, hoping to find something that would help me understand why the alarm went off that night. In one of the boxes, I found old photo albums. I sat on the floor and started flipping through the pages. Photos of my childhood, family holidays, trips, all of it brought a smile to my face. But then I came across one photo that made me pause. The photo showed our house, but it looked different. The windows were different, and there were unfamiliar people standing on the porch. I remembered that my parents had bought this house from another family, and I decided to ask my mom about the previous owners. I called my mom and asked her about the previous owners of the house. She was initially surprised by my question but then told me that the house belonged to a family named Johnson. They had lived there for many years, but then tragedy struck. It turned out that the Johnsons' eldest daughter, Emily, had gone missing. She was never found, and the family was forced to sell the house and move away. My mom said that she and my dad knew about this story but decided not to tell me to avoid scaring me. I was shocked. Could this tragedy somehow be connected to what happened that night? I decided to find out more about Emily and her family. I started by searching for information online. I found a few articles about Emily's disappearance, but nothing concrete. Then I decided to visit the local library, where old newspaper archives were kept. At the library, I found several articles about Emily's disappearance. She vanished one night, and no one saw her leave the house. The police conducted an investigation but found no traces. The family was devastated, and eventually, they sold the house and moved away. I also found an article stating that a few years after Emily's disappearance, strange things began happening in the house. People who lived there after the Johnsons complained about noises, the alarm going off, and other inexplicable phenomena. That evening, I decided to stay in the house for one more night. I wanted to understand if something from the past was connected to what happened to me. I settled in the living room with a book, but I couldn't concentrate on reading. My thoughts were occupied by Emily and her family. Around midnight, I heard a strange noise in the kitchen. I got up and tiptoed to the door. The sound repeated, and I realized it was footsteps. I froze in fear, but then I decided I needed to find out who it was. I slowly opened the door and entered the kitchen. No one was there, but I noticed that the back door was slightly ajar. I approached the door and looked outside. On the porch stood a figure, and I immediately recognized her. It was Emily. Emily looked just like she did in the photos I had seen. She was wearing a nightgown and looked at me with sadness. I couldn't believe my eyes, but I knew this wasn't a dream. "Emily?" I asked softly. She nodded and took a step toward me. I felt a chill emanating from her, but I wasn't afraid. I knew she wouldn't harm me. "What happened to you?" I asked. Emily didn't answer but pointed to the attic. I understood that I needed to go up there. Emily and I went up to the attic. She approached one of the boxes and pointed at it. I opened the box and found an old diary inside. On the cover was written Emily. I started flipping through the pages and realized it was her diary. In it, she described her thoughts and feelings, as well as the strange things that happened in the house. She wrote about feeling unsafe and being afraid to stay alone. In the last entry, she wrote about hearing footsteps in the attic at night and deciding to go up there. There were no more entries after that. I realized that Emily had disappeared in the attic. Perhaps she found something that led to her disappearance. I decided to search the attic more thoroughly. After a few hours of searching, I found a hiding place behind one of the beams. Inside the hiding place was an old key. I took it and showed it to Emily. She nodded and pointed to the door leading to the basement. Emily and I went down to the basement. I had never liked that place, it had always seemed dark and scary to me. But now I knew I had to find answers. In the basement, I found a door I had never noticed before. It was locked, and I realized the key from the hiding place fit this door. I opened the door and entered. Inside was a small room with an old chest. I opened the chest and found old letters and photographs inside. The photographs showed Emily and her family, and the letters spoke of how Emily was not the only one who had disappeared in this house. I realized that the house held many secrets and that Emily's disappearance was not an isolated incident. The letters mentioned a spirit that took children. Emily had become one of its victims. I decided I needed to tell my parents and the police about this. Perhaps they could help uncover this secret and free the souls of those who had disappeared in this house. I contacted my parents and told them everything I had discovered. They were shocked but decided to help me. We went to the police and showed them the letters and photographs I had found. The police began an investigation and discovered that strange things had indeed happened in the house. They decided to perform a cleansing ritual to banish the spirit that took the children. After the cleansing ritual, the house became peaceful. I no longer felt fear and anxiety when I was there alone. Emily also found peace and no longer appeared. My parents and I decided to sell the house and move to Vermont. I was glad I could help uncover the secret of Emily's disappearance and free the souls of those who had suffered in this house. Years have passed, and I often think back to that night when the alarm went off, and I met Emily. It was one of the scariest and, at the same time, most important moments in my life. I realize that sometimes you need to face your fears to find the truth. Now I live in Vermont with my parents and enjoy a peaceful life. But I will always remember that house and the secrets it held. And, of course, I will always remember Emily, who helped me find answers and free the souls of those who had suffered.